Hi, I'm Jordan Stone with The Good Ride, and today we are going to look at the women's tweaker from Jones. I am not a traditional free rider, haven't been since my 20s, so please bear with me, but I did get in the park just for you guys, so consider yourself lucky. I tested this board on multiple days in a variation of spring conditions, some set up like icy hard pack conditions all the way to softer with light snow 2 to 3 inches to see how it handled in variable conditions. Pros of this board: it is a true twin. Freestyle board has a little bit more spring and pop than some of its other counterparts. Cons of it: a pretty soft little flex personality, so really shines in softer conditions and not variable conditions. So I rode a 149 with the Conda from Now and my Kinsley boots from K2. So the women's tweaker features a true twin tip to tail shape. As you can see, a little bit docked off on the edge here. This is just a fun aesthetic shape. I didn't notice it did anything functional on there. The women's tweaker has a positive camber almost to tip and tail. Not quite full true camber here. There is a little bit of early rise and that 3D contour spoon nose. I think it's more of that spoon nose than early rise, but you can definitely tell that that camber doesn't reach all the way to the tip and tail like a traditional true camber board. But don't worry about that. I found it very forgiving. You can skate, you can ride off the lift without feeling catchy. The camber lends itself to stability on the snow. It feels the most consistent and predictable on softer snow. I did find that this camber profile created a little bit of insecurity when the snow was really hard or it was set up and wanted to move the board all over the place. It required a lot of quick adjustment. For this reason, I recommend this board for an intermediate rider all the way up to an advanced rider. If you're in that beginner place and you really want to ride a true twin, maybe check out Women's Basic.
And take a look at Blower Board Shop. They're helping us bring these reviews to you and supporting The Good Ride, so we'd appreciate it if you support them.
So let's talk about flex personality of the tweaker here. They rank this at a pretty soft flex. You can see here through the middle of the board, quite a bit of flex, but once you get down into the tail past these stringers, there's quite a bit more. What I noticed, because of this sort of stiffness underneath the foot, I was really only able to recruit that part of the board. Maybe it's my weight, maybe it's the aggressiveness or my timidness in the park. I couldn't really recruit that nice pop from the middle of the board and that softness. Buttering into it was pretty good. The only downside is that this does feature that 3D contour. As long as you buttered off the middle of the board, you could really get back into it and put your whole weight into the butter. If you ended up slipping off to the side or buttering off the edge, that 3D contour would actually pop you out of the butter. Just be mindful that 3D might make you feel a little unstable or a little washy. All right, let's talk about edge hold for the women's tweaker. The tweaker on the Jones, just like many of the Jones, does have a slight disruption here. It's hard to see here on the camera, but there is a few little extra contact points. It also does have that medium camber flex, which really lends itself to exceptional edge hold on softer conditions. I did, however, find that the edge hold was a little bit more finicky on harder conditions, especially uneven surfaces. I found a lot of chatter through the tail, and soft, I'd be going that edge and feeling this bouncing back and forth, but held well through a variation of turning radius. So I was able to get the tweaker on uneven snow and on a variation of snow. I found when it transitioned from a softer, smoother conditions onto setup or even like more mashed potato texture, that this board started to get a little bit harder to control. It required a lot of quick on-the-spot adjustments that really can create some insecurity when you're riding. It can feel a little bit like you have to be right on top of the board. The other thing I did notice on this board is that it was highly influenced by where your weight was on the board. If you were set back, which a lot of times people will do when they get into uneven surfaces, they'll lean more into that rear foot dominant riding. This board felt even more insecure. It really thrives in a southern stance that you're going to see in more park conditions with groomed trails or just nice, soft, smooth trails. All right, let's talk about speed, pretty fast board. Again, having that camber profile that's almost a full camber profile allows the distribution of weight through a variation of turning radiuses and makes it feel very stable on the board. As long as you can stay centered on the board, this rallies right into jumps. It goes really well into boxes, rails, and then if you're just casually cruising around the mountain, it holds up really well. The base, pow, look how beautiful that is. Not only does it look really nice and very cool, this does feature the centered 8000 base that you're going to see on their Premier Women's board on the Earhart, as well as the Rally Cat, which is the other board I reviewed for Jones. Be mindful, because this is a park specific board. This is the one they really designed to be your freestyle. You're going to beat this thing up. The bottom of the board is going to be harder to tune. You're going to need to use clear PTEX or have someone use that. If you're doing black PTEX, which is easier to use and more user friendly, this pretty base might start looking a little bit scarred up. If you are a DIY, you like to do it yourself, that clear PTEX needs to be done with the PTEX gun, and those are pretty expensive. So just be mindful to keep this board riding the way you want it to. You're either going to have to invest in equipment to take care of it or make friends with someone at a tune shop. As far as that turning experience goes, really quick underfoot. It has these carbon stringers underneath the footbed. My best guess was that they were trying to make this board feel more aggressive for the aggressive park rider while still giving it the softness and maneuverability of a jib board. I wasn't a fan of it. The variation in flex profile from soft to stiff to soft to stiff to soft made it a little confusing, and I had a really big disconnect between this space. However, just going over into your turns, transitioning into the turns, felt pretty smooth. Where that really made a big difference was going at faster speeds. Where your weight is on this board is really going to dictate how this turning experience is. When you are centered on this board, it is very quick, very turny. That 3D contour really lends itself to a quick transition in and out of turns. And that little bit of stiffness does help hold through a variety of turning radius. I did try to carve with this board, but the stance, the width, and the conditions never really lent itself to it. Every time I'd try to get on there, it wouldn't hold into the edge, I'd wash. So given its flex profile, it is unlikely that this would be able to hold a true carve or a full circle carve at speeds. So the women's tweaker is a centered true twin freestyle board. What this means is the rider's weight is centered on here and then it presses straight down into the snow. Now if you transfer this into powder conditions, what you're going to find is that the rider is going to have to sit all the way back into this tail to get any lift from the nose, causing you to probably fatigue pretty bad in that back leg, or in some cases actually endoing because you don't have enough lift in that tail. It's really not designed for powder conditions. So that 3D contour of that spoon nose, which again is sort of this, think of it as a spoon, this convexity in that nose and tail, does give it a nice smooth surfy feel in deeper snow conditions, but it really doesn't help with float. If you are looking for a more powder specific or even something that has a little more versatility within the Jones line, I highly recommend the new board for 2025, the Rally Cat, or even the Dreamweaver. Both of them have a setback stance, a little bit more directional nose. All right, let's get to the fun part, the freestyle, the park, which you've all been waiting for. Hopefully if you came to look at the tweaker, that's because that's what you're looking for. That's where this board shines. So I did take it into the park. Please have some grace with me. I'm almost 40 and I am not trying to hurt myself or wrap myself around a rail. So I did get on a few boxes. I did hit a few jumps. I did butter and play around with reverts and 180s and those things within limits. If you are younger, if you have less self-preservation than I do, you are gonna love this board. That edge-to-edge capacity is great for leading into turns, and those reinforced plates under here made landing jumps super smooth, made it feel really stable during that landing. Switch riding, again, it's a twin board, so when I turned this around and switched, it felt the exact same as it did in my regular stance. I think I even did do a little bit of switch riding in my footage. Still held an edge really well, still buttered really well. It was super easy to slip in and out of going from regular to goofy. Again, this would be a good jib board. If you're someone who's looking for a rail specific board, consult a tuner If you're somebody who's a little bit more equipped with this, you're definitely going to want to detune this edge because of that disruption that will keep you from catching and not face planting. The one limitation I found with this board came from its ollie and its pop. I know the intention of the designers when they put this in here was to give it a little bit more stiffness, give it a little bit more pop. I found that it took a lot of effort. Most of my ollieing power came from the back of the board, and it's so soft back here that I didn't get a lot out of it. I think if you are maybe a heavier rider, this is a 149, this can handle up to 155, 160. If you're a heavier rider, you may be able to manipulate from the middle of the board past these carbon stringers and get a little bit more pop, but I noticed at my weight, I was not able to get this full flex from the middle of the board, so it just didn't feel as lively as I would have liked. So overall, on the women's tweaker by Jones, this is a great option for intermediate to advanced riders looking for a park freestyle specific board. The board is limited by its ability to adapt to variation conditions. If you are looking for a board with a little bit more versatility, more of that one board quiver killer, consider the Jones Rally Cat. Very, very similar board with that all mountain directional stance. They also have the Dreamweaver, which is going to give you even more directional stance. And that's it.